Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. Now, we're talking about the factors that will shape Nigeria in 2015, and we're going to be talking about the economy, especially oil, something that has bothered Nigerians in the last couple of months. And I have here with me Tobenna Okoli. Thanks for coming here today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's talk about the budget. Let's start with the budget. And I think we've reduced the benchmark about 2 or 3 times. We went from 78 to 73 to 65. And even though the oil price is still crashing, they've said they're going to leave it at that. How do you think the budget is going to work this year?
Well, if you have oil currently trading at $56 per barrel, and February supplies are already looking at about $52 per barrel. You look at the differential, 65, 52, we have about $13 deficit. I think the only thing we need to do is to borrow money to balance the budget. But the thing is, we need to, because the price is also likely to keep dropping further, we need to actually look at, let's say, a 3 to 5 year plan for how we can diversify, wean ourselves off oil and create new areas that would really boost our GDP.
I think something that's bothered a lot of people is the fact that there's almost sort of no communication from government, especially the Minister of Finance, on how this is going to work. People are not sure, like you said, if we're going to borrow or if we're going to have to run in a deficit. Nobody understands what's going to happen with salary, especially in a year when we're going to spend a lot with elections. Are we in trouble, basically? That's what I want to ask.
Are we in for hard times? The answer is yes. Are we in trouble? Well, we are human beings who adapt. But the thing is, I think the situation is so fluid that whatever you might say today might be old news tomorrow. So I'm sure the ministries, especially the Ministry of Petroleum and Finance, are actually still looking at the situation and trying to get their heads around it.
Yeah.
So
the minister herself did say that Nigeria was ready, even if oil falls below 60%, that the government was ready.
Below $60.
Below $60, sorry, that the government was ready. What do you think she means by that? How are they ready? What are they ready with?
Well, naturally, you expect them to be to see that they are ready or to appear to be on top of things. So it's expected. But I think the first thing is we need to be realistic. We are in for hard times. We shouldn't beat about the bush. It's like the banking sector crisis of 2009. We faced it. It was a difficult time, but we also eventually overcame it. So this is something we would overcome. And because the oil price fluctuation is cyclical, it will drop, but eventually it will rise. But the thing is, how do we ensure that when these shocks occur, our economy is robust enough to withstand it? For example, Saudi Arabia has about $800 billion lying aside. So if oil just drops even below $20, they will still be doing okay for.
So that's something that people have talked about. We've had sort of good times for about 4 or 5 years now, where oil has been trading for over $100. And it looks like we didn't seem prepared for this, even at that. What should we be doing differently going forward now, even if we know we should have done something differently?
Well, I think, to be sincere, we've done a couple of things. We've taken a lot of initiatives to wean ourselves off oil, agriculture, trying to stimulate several other industries. But I've done a personal analysis of this, and I think that we need to look for industries that are high on productivity, like technology, as opposed to agriculture, which is where you engage more people, but the output is less. Oil and gas is highly productive because I don't think we're engaging more than 400,000 Nigerians in the oil and gas sector. And yet these guys are producing about 90% of our exports and about 80% of our GDP. So if we look at areas like technology, entertainment would have been good, but in Nigeria there's so many problems. But we need to look at areas where you have few people producing so much, and then you can subsidize the other areas of the economy with that.
You've mentioned IT, you've mentioned agriculture. A lot of people see these things as more long-term plans, things that maybe in another 5-10 years, Nigeria will start getting results from. Are there things we should be looking at in the short to medium term, especially as things where it's falling on our laps now, we have to do something? What are some of the areas Nigerians should start looking at going forward?
Agriculture is long-term, technology isn't. Because technology is such nowadays that it changes by the second.
So what sort of investments would we be looking at there, for example?
Well, the good thing about technology is it's not so investment heavy. It's more about creating a conducive environment. So if you create the right environment, the guys abroad will come. It's the same way you have places like Monte Carlo creating an environment where you can come in and gamble, or some places create tax havens where people can just come in and set up financial companies with minimal tax. So I think if we arrange the right environment, we have a very, very viable population as per a large percentage of young people within our population and the sheer size of our population. The kind of demand stories are, so to speak, our population tells 170 million people is very compelling. So what we need to do is create an environment where whatever it is that, whatever challenges, say, a Microsoft, a Google is having in America or in Europe, we can maybe give them tax holidays, give them incentives to come here, set up shop, and stimulate the local tech industry. Because if an economy is going to develop, it will not develop solely based on the guys on ground. We need foreigners to come in. The same way you can see the UAE now being a hospitality hub, beyond the fact that they have so much oil. So that's the kind of thing we need to do. It's not so much about us doing it, but let's allow for the foreigners to come in.
Yeah, a lot of these things, I mean, they sound interesting. It's nice to talk about investment, but we have to realize that a lot of factors also are counting against us. We live in very dire times. A lot of investors don't want to come into Nigeria where there's terrorism, whether we like it or not. I mean, you and I here know that it might be in certain sections of the country, but anybody outside of Nigeria says it's Nigeria that has a problem. These are things that are problems for investors. Some people talk about corruption. So this investment drives, how do we, is it possible to keep asking for them without necessarily fixing all of these other things?
Well,
and also diversifying the economy per se.
They go hand in hand, really. But the truth is, the investors who tell you that Nigeria is unsafe are rookie investors. Realistic investors know the specific states that are hot zones and the areas that are good for business. So I don't think that is so much of an argument. I think, what was the second point? I think I lost.
Yeah, we can move on from that. Actually.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't think, as per investments, it's really a problem with Nigeria being unsafe or corruption. Yeah. The truth is, without trying to downplay a bad thing, corruption is not typical to just Nigeria. The thing is, how productive can you be regardless of corruption? Corruption should not totally ground the economy. So if we can tackle corruption, yes, but at the same time also continue to make the environment conducive. By being conducive, multiple taxation, the rule of law as it pertains to honoring business contracts, keep working on infrastructure, keep working on the internet infrastructure if we're going to go the way of tech. And eventually things will begin to pick up. Countries like India have not resolved all their infrastructure problems, but they have recorded considerable success in that area. So
talking about the falling oil prices and the budget and all of that, I mean, we read newspapers, we see all of these figures, we see different quotes and words, and some of us don't even understand these things. Now, for the man on the street who is hawking, who doesn't have a day job, who's looking for a job, what does this mean for the average Nigerian, and what sort of measures should they be taking going forward from now?
Well, the first thing is our revenues are dropping, so naturally government spending will be reduced. So a lot of the benefits we enjoy will drop. But interestingly, because all the oil price is dropping, it means that eventually you get to a point where we won't have to pay subsidy anymore. In fact, it was on record that the minister said that by the time we get to $60 per barrel, Nigeria would perhaps not need to pay subsidies. So we are getting to a situation where perhaps if oil gets to like $40, we might even see a reduction, a removal of subsidy and a reduction in oil price.
So that's even tougher times for Nigerians?
No, well, tougher from the perspective of income, but better times from the perspective of, because we're importing about 70% of our petroleum products use. If the price is dropping, it means that if you're getting say petrol at 97 naira a litre at the pump, you could get it for 18 naira a litre if the price keeps dropping. And for businesses that are dependent on petrol or diesel, as the case may be, perhaps they will do better. So it's a win on one side
and lose on the other. Yeah. Talking about the oil and the elections and the economy, how big a factor do you think is going to play? A lot of people talk about security being the major factor going to the elections next month. Do you think this is going to be a factor as well?
It will be a considerable factor. It definitely will be a bashing point for the current government, because people would continue to argue that adequate preparations could have been made for this. When oil was dropping from $110 per barrel to 100 to 90 to 80, what were you doing? But the thing is, these are not things that you fix the moment they begin to manifest. These are things that we would have put in place for a long time. And for me, without trying to hold sway for the government, they tried, but perhaps the direction or the intensity of trying was not the best. Yes, we set up a sovereign wealth fund by $1 billion, which is really nothing.
Yeah.
If you look at it, we have a couple of things we're trying to do, but I think at the end of the day, if we perhaps need shocks like this, we had shocks like this in the 80s, but I think we need a contemporary shock like this to actually look at diversifying our economy more seriously. And as by it affecting the elections, like I said, there will be major talking points, but at this point, there's really little anybody can do than to just tighten our belts and hope for the best.
Will our foreign reserves be of any help at this point, as weak as they seem to be these days?
Well,
because as the Naira is dropping, things in the foreign reserve are also looking shaky.
So it's pretty low. I think it's about below, I can't remember the last figures, but I think it's about below 30 billion USD. So it's really nothing if the prices just keep falling. But I think that if we begin to tighten our belts and we begin to look at a 3 to 5 year window, we might pull out of it better than a lot of people are looking at it at the moment.
Just final note now, 2015 just started. Any bright spots at all for the economy that we'll be looking forward to as the year unfolds?
Yes, definitely there'll be bright spots. I'm looking at the financial sector. I think it will continue to grow post-election. I'm looking at, because I see technology as the future. I see retail business, e-commerce, technology-based business is really looking up, and all eyes also on how low those petroleum products prices will drop, and to see how they help businesses that depend so much on diesel and petrol. So that could also be a blessing in disguise.
All right, thank you very much, Tobenna. Hopefully 2015 is not as bad as a lot of people think it's going to be, but I mean, it's going to be a tough year, definitely, with the government revenue. Thanks for being here today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
When we come back, we have a special entertainment guest in the house. If you watched Big Brother this year, you do not want to leave your seats. Please join us again.